Your job is terminated effective today. Security will escort you out, he said, eyes never leaving his MacBook Pro. For a second, I thought I had misheard him. The words were so flat and calm that they did not sound like they were meant for a real person. It felt more like he was reading from a template email. No hesitation, no stumble, just a sentence trying to erase 28 years of my life in one breath. If you have ever been blindsided like that by a boss, hit like and subscribe so more people hear what really happens behind those glass doors. We were in a glass-walled conference room on the 12th floor. He sat across from me, shoulders square, tie perfectly aligned. He looked the part. Young, polished, newly minted CEO. He just did not look at me. Behind his chair, the HR rep stood stiff, clutching a folder so tightly that her knuckles were white. Her eyes met mine for half a second, then dropped to the carpet. I felt it before I fully understood it. A hot wave rising from my chest into my throat. Humiliation. Confusion. A sting so sharp it made the room feel smaller. After almost 3 decades here, after helping build Anchor Point Logistics from 3 folding tables and a whiteboard into a major operation, I was being dismissed like a contractor whose project had ended. No warning, no conversation, no thank you, just a line read off a screen. I swallowed slowly, buying a few seconds. The air felt heavier. I could hear the hum of the vents, the tap of the HR rep's heel, a phone ringing faintly outside. I see, I said. My voice came out steadier than I felt. On the surface, I was calm. Inside, my heart was pounding hard enough that I could feel it in my neck. He flicked his fingers on the trackpad, scrolling through whatever script he had in front of him. You will receive information regarding severance by email, he said. Your access will be deactivated within the hour. Still no eye contact. It struck me then how young he really was. 29. Fresh from an expensive MBA program, with his last name already on half the building. He had watched this company from the outside his whole life, then stepped straight into the top seat the second his father decided it was time for next-generation leadership. He cleared his throat once, then folded his hands. Please hand over your badge, he added. There it was. The final ritual. I reached for the lanyard around my neck. The plastic was warm from my skin. I had worn that badge through night shifts, emergency calls, warehouse walkthroughs at 3 in the morning. I pulled it off slowly and set it on the table. The little clink it made against the polished surface sounded louder than it should have. The HR rep flinched. She opened her folder with shaking hands and slid a paper toward me. Acknowledgement of termination, she murmured. We just need your signature here. Her eyes were glassy, like she wanted to say she was sorry but had been trained not to. I read the page. Termination effective immediately. Return of company property. Confidentiality. The usual legal language. I could feel my pulse in my fingertips as I picked up the pen. For a moment, one clear thought cut through everything. They really think this is the end of my story. I signed. Slowly. Clearly. My name had been on contracts and shareholder agreements for decades. It felt strange seeing it at the bottom of a form that tried to push me to the sidelines of something I helped build. As I slid the paper back, I finally spoke again. Before I go, I said, keeping my voice even. Tell your father that the board meeting later today should be interesting. That got him. He looked up. For the first time since I walked into the room, his eyes finally met mine. Confusion flickered across his face. He tried to cover it with a frown, but he was not fast enough. What board meeting? He asked. I held his gaze. Behind the polished haircut and the expensive suit, I still saw the same boy who used to follow me around the warehouse when he was 10, asking what the loading dock lights meant. You will find out, I said. I did not raise my voice. I just let the sentence sit there. The HR rep looked between us, clearly lost. He broke eye contact first, glancing back down at his screen. That will be all, he said. Of course it would. I turned and headed for the door. The room felt smaller on the way out. As I stepped into the hallway, a security guard was waiting. He was a big guy, but his expression was soft and uneasy. Mr. Patterson, he said quietly. They asked me to walk you out. I nodded. You are just doing your job, I replied. Nothing personal. His shoulders relaxed a little. He fell into step beside me as we walked past workstations and glass offices. Heads turned, then quickly turned away. As we passed the main open area, I caught sight of a framed photo on the wall. A black and white shot of the founding team standing in front of the empty warehouse that would eventually become our first Chicago hub. There I was, at 30, standing right next to his father. No gray hair, no wrinkles, just tired eyes, a cheap tie, and the look of a man who believed loyalty still meant something. I slowed for a step. "You okay, sir?" the security guard asked. I kept walking. "I will be," I said. We reached the elevator. He swiped his card and pressed the button for the lobby. The door slid shut. For a brief moment, it was just the two of us in a mirrored box, dropping floor by floor. That was when the second wave hit. The first had been humiliation. This one was anger. Not the loud, shouting kind. The heavy kind. The kind that sits in your chest like a stone. My stomach tightened. My jaw clenched. My mind replayed the years in flashes. The crises we survived. The clients I had saved. The nights I stayed until dawn so others could keep their jobs. And now, a kid who had not even been born when I signed my first lease was sending me out like broken equipment. But anger was not the only thing there. Beneath it, steady and cold, was something else. Preparedness. I do not panic easily. Logistics teaches you to think 3 moves ahead. So this moment, as humiliating as it was not the end. It was the trigger. The elevator doors opened into the lobby. Sunlight poured through the front windows. The receptionist looked up, saw me with security, and froze for a second. Then she forced a polite smile. "Have a good day, Mr. Patterson," she said quietly. "You too," I replied. We walked past the wall that displayed the company history. Dates, milestones, photos of ribbon cuttings, expansions, awards. My name was not printed there, but I knew exactly what each of those moments had cost. We approached the revolving doors, and the guard slowed. "This is as far as I go," he said. I held out my hand. He hesitated, then shook it. "I know you treat people with respect," I told him. "Remember that when someone higher up asks you to do something that feels wrong." He nodded. "Yes, sir." I stepped through the revolving door and felt the outside air hit my face. It was cool and sharp. For the first time in 28 years, I was standing on the sidewalk outside Anchor Point Logistics without a badge in my pocket. The building towered above me, all glass and steel. Somewhere near the top, in a corner office he had not earned, sat Bradley Patterson Jr., probably already drafting some memo about difficult decisions and strategic realignment. I checked my watch. 3 hours. That was the window the clause gave them. Because while Junior thought he was ending my story, what he had really done was trip a wire I had laid more than a decade ago. Section 12B. Emergency Succession Protocol. A clause buried in the shareholder agreement. I had written it years earlier after watching another relative of his try to fire half our warehouse staff to make a budget look better. The board had signed it. The lawyers had approved it. Then everyone forgot about it. Everyone except me. That clause stated something simple. If a non-equity holding executive terminated a founding team member without a formal board vote, all executive authority would be suspended. Control would revert to the majority shareholder until an emergency board meeting could be held. They never expected it to be used. They certainly never expected it to be used on the Golden Sun. I pulled my phone from my pocket and checked the delivery status on a series of overnight envelopes. All delivered. All signed for. All time-stamped. Board packet. Shareholder breakdown. Section 12B activation. All filed hours before I walked into that conference room. Junior thought he had fired me. What he had really done was prove to the board that he did not understand the company he was running. I slipped my phone back into my pocket and took a slow breath. The sting of being pushed out was still there. I let myself feel it for a moment. The knot in my stomach. The tightness in my chest. Then I let something else settle over it. Patience. Because real justice does not always arrive with noise. Sometimes it waits in the fine print, or sits quietly in a file cabinet for 13 years. And sometimes it starts counting down the second a young, arrogant CEO reads a line off his laptop and thinks he has finally taken control. I knew exactly what he would do after that meeting. He would sit back in that chair that used to be mine, open another tab on that MacBook Pro, and tell himself he had just made his first real executive decision. He would feel older, sharper, more important. He would think he had cleaned out a relic from his father's era. If you have ever had someone treat your entire career like a line item on their to-do list, hit like so more people see how these stories really unfold. I walked to my car with steady steps, but my body felt heavier with each one. My mind was racing, not with panic, with memories. The first day I walked into this company, we did not have a fancy building. We had a rented warehouse and 3 cheap desks that wobbled if you leaned on them. The founder, his father, was standing on a milk crate giving a speech about how we were going to change the way people thought about freight. He believed it. He just did not know how to run a business. That part had been my job. I unlocked my sedan, got in, and just sat there for a minute with my hands on the wheel. The parking lot looked the same as it always did. Same painted lines. Same faded loading dock numbers. Same smell of diesel and asphalt. I expected to feel rage. Instead, I felt tired. 28 years of my life had been inside that building. Promotions passed, crises handled, employees trained, problems solved quietly before they could embarrass senior leadership. I had been the person they called when the lawyers started circling or when a client threatened to walk. And now I was the problem they thought they had removed. My fingers tightened around the wheel. Then I reminded myself of something important. I had never built my place here to depend on a job title. Titles are decorations. Equity is control. I started the engine and pulled out of the lot. As I drove, one very specific night came back to me, clear as if I was still in that empty office with the cheap blinds rattling from the air vent. Back then, Anchor Point Logistics was struggling. We had just lost a major client because one of the founder's relatives botched a contract renewal. Payroll was tight. Investors were nervous. People were whispering about sell-offs. Bradley Sr. had called me into his office close to midnight. He was sitting at his desk surrounded by half-empty coffee cups and stacks of paper. "We can make this work," he kept saying. "We just need a fresh story for investors. Something about innovation. Something about our future vision. What we need," I told him, "is structure. And a fallback plan for when someone without experience tries to swing an axe." He laughed at the time, but I was not joking. That night was the first time Section 12B appeared as more than an idea scribbled on a notepad. Emergency Succession Protocol. On paper, it sounded dry, but the intent was simple. If someone who did not own a single share in this company tried to fire a founding member without the board's approval, they would not just be overruled. They would lose their authority. I worked with our legal team word by word. We made sure it was airtight. We made sure the board understood that it was a safety lock, not a weapon. They all nodded. They all signed. Then they moved on and never thought about it again. I never moved on. Because that night, I made another decision. If I was going to give this company my time, my sweat, my reputation, I was going to make sure I owned enough of it that no one could treat me like a disposable expense. So I started collecting. It began small. 0.5% instead of a cash bonus here. A stock grant in exchange for cleaning up a failed expansion there. Every time we closed a big contract, I used my leverage to ask for a sliver more ownership instead of a new title or a bigger office. By year 7, I had 18%. By year 15, 35%. Then the cracks in other people's lives became opportunities in mine. Our CFO went through a brutal divorce. He needed liquidity. Fast. The market price for his shares was not friendly, and outside buyers would have meant giving strangers power inside the company. So I made him an offer. Clean. Quiet. Fast. He took it. When the founder's brother sued us over a patent claim he barely understood and lost badly, he wanted to exit without noise. He did not want to sit in boardrooms where his failure would be a silent guest at every meeting. We arranged a settlement. The lawyers handled the language. I acquired his remaining stake with one condition in writing. He would never interfere with our client list again. You would be amazed how much power a person can accumulate simply by being patient, dependable, and willing to be paid in percentages while everyone else chases titles and applause. When the dust settled, my stake sat at 72%. Majority shareholder. Filed quietly. Recorded with the state. Confirmed by our counsel. No announcement. No glossy graphic on the website. My name appeared on no billboard, no leadership page, no Meet Our Visionaries poster. But my signature sat on the documents that determined who really controlled this company. I pulled into a small diner a few blocks from the building, parked, and went inside. The place smelled like burnt coffee and syrup. A waitress in a fading uniform asked what I wanted. "Just coffee," I said. As she walked away, I checked my phone. Every envelope I had sent that morning had been received. The tracking system showed green check marks across the board. Board members, lead investors, legal counsel. Each one of them now had a thick packet sitting on their desk. On the cover, Section 12B Activation. Emergency Succession Review. Inside, the shareholder breakdown, copies of signed agreements, timestamps, The exact clause that spelled out what happened when a non-equity executive fired a founding member without a board vote. The best part was the timing. The trigger letter had been dated and notarized hours before Junior called me into that conference room. What happens when you give someone authority without responsibility or understanding? You get what was happening at that very moment. Escalation. Not the loud kind. Not shouting, not slamming doors. The quiet escalation that happens in inboxes, in phone calls, in calendar alerts that used to say lunch with client and now say emergency board meeting. I got into my car again, closed the door, and let the silence wrap around me. This was the part people never see in revenge stories. The waiting, the space between the pain and the payoff. The hours when doubt sneaks in and asks if you went too far. What if they found a way around the clause? What if the board chose bloodline over bylaws? What if they decided that I was the problem for daring to protect myself? I let those questions run through me. Then I answered them. The contracts were clear. The documentation was complete. The signatures were all there. I had not cheated anyone. I had not manipulated anyone. I had simply done what any careful, undervalued builder learns to do. I had made myself unfireable. Whether they liked it or not, the law was sitting on my side of the table. I turned the key again, the engine rumbled to life, and I pulled away from the curb. The next time I walked into that building, I told myself, I would not be the one being escorted. I would be the one everyone was waiting for. My termination did not start this process. It proved it necessary. I took a sip of the coffee. It was bitter and weak, but it grounded me. Anger still sat there in my chest, but now it had company. Anticipation, curiosity, a strange calm. I pictured what was happening back inside the building. I imagined Junior in that glass office on the 12th floor, already planning his next moves. Reorganizing org charts, drafting bright, bold emails about modernization and streamlined decision-making. Maybe he was thinking about updating his social media. Sometimes leadership means making hard calls, he might write, attaching a photo of himself staring thoughtfully at the city skyline. He would have no idea that, in those same minutes, his name was being flagged in legal documents as the person who had triggered an emergency suspension of his own authority. Somewhere else in the city, in different corners of our network, the real escalation was beginning. I imagined the lead investor sitting in his corner office, flipping through the packet with growing alarm. The first few pages would feel like a history lesson, a breakdown of original equity, transactions over the years, approvals, transfers, all neat, all legal. Then his eyes would reach Section 12B, the clause, the scenario, the outcome. He would realize that our brand new CEO had just terminated a founding member with a majority stake, without a board vote, and without even understanding that such a move pulled the emergency brake on his own power. The words immediate suspension of executive authority had a very different ring when your name sat above them in an example. In another building, I imagined our general counsel, Morrison, reading the same packet. His assistant would have handed it to him with the usual, "This seemed urgent," tone that every lawyer learns to fear. He would skim the cover, then sit down properly the moment he saw my signature. He would read faster then. His brow would furrow. He would reach the clause, reach the timestamps, reach the copy of the termination memo attached. He would see that my activation letter had been received before the firing notice was sent. He would understand what that meant. He would probably say exactly what I knew he would. Oh no. Then, a second time. Quieter. Oh no. Because this was no longer a question of hurt feelings or personal history. This was now about fiduciary duty, personal liability, regulatory compliance. Words that make board members cancel golf games and catch the next elevator. I paid for my coffee, left a tip, and walked back outside. The sky had shifted slightly, clouds moving in to cover some of the sun. The air felt cooler. I checked the time. 2 hours and some change left on the clock. I leaned against the car and let myself really sit with everything for a moment. The humiliation of being walked out. The anger at the disrespect. The relief that my planning had not been for nothing. And under all of that, something I did not want to admit. Sadness. I had known Junior since he was a child. I had taught him how to read financial statements. I had answered his questions about freight lanes and inventory management and client retention. He used to call me Uncle Chuck. Now he had not even been able to look me in the eye while he fired me. I drove back toward headquarters once the 3-hour window was nearly over. The roads all felt familiar, but the meaning behind them had shifted. Every block I passed was a reminder of the deals I had closed, the contracts I had saved, the clients I had brought into a company that now thought it could throw me out with a single sentence. My hands were steady on the wheel, but inside there was a slow burn. Not anger anymore. Resolve. I knew exactly what had to happen next. I had planned for it years ago. The parking garage felt colder than usual as I pulled in. My footsteps echoed off the concrete walls while I walked toward the elevator. I no longer had my badge, so I pressed the call button and waited. When the doors opened, a security guard inside hesitated for just a moment. "Mr. Patterson," he said quietly. "Yes," I replied. He nodded and stepped aside. No questions. No hesitation. He had received updates. Someone had instructed the guards to cooperate. As the elevator rose, I watched the floor numbers tick upward. 5, 7, 10. With each one, my breathing became calmer. The fear and humiliation from earlier were gone now. What was left was the feeling you get when you know you are walking into a moment that will decide everything. The doors opened, and the atmosphere on the 12th floor was nothing like the morning. People were whispering. Assistants were pacing with folders in hand. A few executives stood clustered near the wall, speaking in low voices. Part of me wished this had not been necessary, that his father had prepared him better, that he had taken time to listen instead of racing to act. But he chose arrogance over humility. So here we were. By now, I knew the calls would be starting. Morrison would be on the phone with the board chair. The board chair would be calling the other members. The lead investor would be calling his advisor. Everyone would be circling around the same realization. The kid had pulled a trigger on a weapon he did not understand. Then there was his father. I could picture him clearly, out at the country club, lining up a putt and ignoring the first vibration of his phone. Golf had always been his escape. For years, he spent more and more time out there while I did more and more of the work back at headquarters. The phone would buzz again. He would mutter something and silence it. Only when Morrison's name appeared on the screen for the third or fourth time would he finally sigh, straighten up, and answer. "This better be important," he would say with that familiar irritation. And it would be important. It would be the call that told him his son, on his first big day in the big chair, had just placed the entire leadership structure on a legal cliff edge. As I sat there, breathing in the cool air, I could almost hear that conversation in my head. The clipped tone, the legal terms, the denial, the slow realization. When I stepped out, every conversation stopped. Eyes turned. Some widened. Others dropped instantly. Not one person smiled. I walked past them all without a word. The boardroom was down the hall, door closed. A sign taped to it read, "Emergency session in progress." I placed my hand on the door handle and pushed. Inside, the room was packed. 8 board members, legal counsel, 2 investor representatives. Everyone seated, everyone silent, and everyone staring at a folder in front of them. The Section 12B activation packet. The only person standing was Harold, our board chair. His glasses were low on his nose as he read the final page of the document. When I stepped through the doorway, he looked up. "Mr. Patterson," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "We have been expecting you." The room shifted. Chairs moved. Heads turned. Some people straightened their posture like they had been caught slouching. The tension was thick enough to taste. Bradley Sr. sat near the far end. He looked exhausted. His golf shirt was wrinkled, and he looked older than he had that morning. A man who once thought he controlled the room now sat quietly, hands clasped, waiting to hear how his son had jeopardized everything he built. Junior was not in the room yet. Good. I walked around the long table, taking my time, letting the silence settle the way it needed to. When I reached my old seat, I did not ask for permission. I pulled the chair back, sat down, and placed a single sheet of paper on the table. "Let the record show," I said, "that as majority shareholder, I request a binding vote to review and rescind all executive appointments made in the past 48 hours. There it was. Simple, direct, legally sound. Harold cleared his throat. "The motion has been entered. Before we proceed, we will allow statements from involved parties." Everyone looked at me, but I did not speak yet. Instead, the door opened behind us. Junior stormed in. He was flushed, sweating, phone in hand, tie loose, a stark contrast to the perfectly composed figure he pretended to be earlier. "What is going on?" he demanded. "Why was I not told about this meeting? I am the CEO. I have authority to be here." No one answered him. He looked around the room, searching for support, but every face was stiff and cold. He shifted his glare toward Harold. "Why did no one inform me?" he shouted. Harold remained calm. "Because you do not hold voting power, Bradley. And because your authority has been temporarily suspended." It was like watching a thread snap inside his head. "What do you mean suspended?" he said. "Suspended by who?" I looked at him and spoke softly, because soft can cut deeper than loud ever will. "By you." His mouth opened a little. Confusion spread over his face like a slow stain. I could see the gears struggling to turn. "You triggered Section 12B this morning," I said, "when you terminated me without board approval." He shook his head. No, that clause is old. It is outdated." My father said. "It is active," Harold said firmly. "Legally and immediately. Your unilateral termination violated the protocol. As a result, all executive authority returns to the majority shareholder until this board rules otherwise." He stared at me then. Really stared. Like it was the first time he was seeing me not as an employee, but as something he never expected. A threat. "You cannot do this," he said. His voice cracked. "I am the CEO. This is my father's company." "It was," I said, "until your father brought in partners. Real partners. People who earned their place here. People who made decisions that kept this company alive while you were learning how to tie a tie." His breathing quickened. "You tricked me," he said. "You planned this." I leaned forward. "I did not trick you. I protected the company. You fired someone without understanding who they were or what they had built. That is not leadership. That is negligence." His father spoke then, voice low and pained. "Son," he said, "sit down." Junior looked at him, waiting for support, waiting for someone to defend him. But his father's eyes were tired, disappointed, maybe even ashamed. "Sit down," he repeated. Slowly, Junior lowered himself into a chair, shoulders collapsing inward. His hands trembled slightly. His confidence was gone. What sat in front of us now was not a CEO, not a leader, but a frightened young man who had stepped into a role far too big for him. Harold folded his hands. "We will now proceed to the vote." Every board member raised their hand one by one. The CFO, the investors, operations, finance, even Bradley Sr., after a long silence that seemed to last forever, slowly raised his hand. The vote was unanimous. All executive appointments from the past 48 hours were rescinded. Junior looked like he had been punched. "No," he whispered. "You cannot do this. You cannot just replace me." I took a deep breath and let the truth land where it needed to. "You replaced yourself," I said. Silence fell over the room. Heavy. Final. After the vote, the board chair turned to me. "Mr. Patterson," he said, "as majority shareholder, would you like to assume interim executive authority until a full review is completed?" I nodded once. "Yes. Effective immediately." The sentence echoed in the room like the answer to a riddle that had been waiting years to be solved. Junior stood abruptly. "I am not leaving. I have rights." "Security will escort you out," Harold said. "Your clearance has already been suspended." The irony of those words was not lost on anyone. He had fired me with that same line just 3 hours before. Now he was the one being removed. He backed away from the table, eyes darting around as if searching for an escape route no one would give him. He turned and stormed toward the door, but security was already waiting. "Sir," one of the guards said, "please come with us." Junior froze. His face twisted in humiliation. "This is not over," he muttered. "It is," I replied. The guards escorted him out. The door closed behind him. The room let out a collective breath. Harold spoke softly. "Congratulations, Charles. You are now interim CEO and full executive authority has reverted to you." I nodded, but the satisfaction was not explosive or triumphant. It was quiet, steady, earned. The board began discussing next steps, legal compliance, communication plans. Their voices blended into a hum as I sat there absorbing the moment. This was not the end of revenge. For a moment, I just stood there in the doorway, taking everything in. The bookshelf I built by hand 20 years ago, the framed newspaper clipping from our first big contract, the small Navy plaque that had followed me to every office I've ever had, even the dent on the table from a forklift accident I once covered up so a warehouse kid wouldn't lose his job. This was not just a workspace. It was a map of my entire adult life. I sat down slowly. The chair creaked the way it always had. My hands drifted along the edge of the desk, landing on a small scratch I remembered putting there years ago when I dropped a stapler during an overnight audit shift. Everything felt familiar. But everything had changed. A soft knock came at the door. "Come in," I said. It was one of the assistants, a young woman named Sarah who had only been here a few months. She held a tablet in her hands and looked nervous. "Mr. Patterson," she said carefully, "there is a developing situation downstairs. I thought you should know." I raised an eyebrow. "What kind of situation?" She hesitated. "It is Junior." Of course it was. I stood and followed her toward the elevators. When the doors opened, we stepped inside, and she pressed the button for the lobby. She looked like she wasn't sure if she should keep talking. "You can say it," I said calmly. "He is refusing to leave," she whispered. This was the beginning of consequences. When the meeting adjourned, people left in hushed clusters, whispering about liability and next steps. I stayed seated for a moment, letting the truth settle in my bones. They had tried to erase me. Instead, they handed me back everything I ever built. And more. I stayed seated in the boardroom long after the others left. The noise outside the door had slowly shifted from frantic whispers to the usual hum of office activity, but everything felt different now. The air felt lighter. The weight that had sat in my chest all morning was loosening. My termination had been reversed. My authority had been restored. And the person who thought he owned the future of this company was now the one being escorted out. I finally stood and collected my papers. When I opened the door to leave, the hallway fell quiet again. Some people nodded respectfully. Others looked away, ashamed of how they had avoided me earlier. I did not hold it against them. People follow power in corporate buildings the same way plants follow light. It is instinct. I walked toward my old office. The door was cracked open. Inside, the nameplate with Junior's title had already been removed. Someone had placed my original nameplate on the desk, polished, almost shining. I let out a slow breath. Of course he was. The doors opened into the lobby, and I saw a small crowd gathered near the front entrance. Some employees stood frozen. Others pretended to look busy while watching from the corner of their eye. Security officers flanked both sides of the entrance, and in the middle was Junior. His tie was crooked. His hair was messy. His eyes were red and wet, the way they get when a person is holding back something they do not want to show. "I am not leaving," he said again, louder this time. "This is my father's company. My company. You cannot force me out." The lead security officer tried to speak calmly. "Sir, your badge has been deactivated. You no longer have authorization to remain in restricted areas." Junior threw his arms up. "I do not care about authorization. My father will fix this. My father will come down here, and—" "He will not," I said, stepping forward. Everyone turned. Junior's chest rose and fell quickly. He pointed at me with shaking fingers. "You," he said, his voice breaking. "You are doing this. You have been trying to take this company away from me for years. This is personal." "It is not personal," I said quietly. "It is responsible. It is betrayal," he shouted. His foot slipped slightly on the polished floor. He steadied himself. His eyes were wild, full of a mixture of anger, disbelief, and something deeper. "Fear. You fired me today," I said. "You tried to terminate a founding member without the authority to do so. Not because of policy, not because of performance, but because you thought removing me would make you stronger. It did," he said quickly, more reflex than conviction. "It made you reckless," I replied. He shook his head, tears forming. "I was trying to modernize this place. I was trying to prove myself. You do not prove yourself by cutting down the people who built the ground you are standing on." He stared at me. For a long moment, he did not move. He looked like a person standing on a cliff edge, trying to figure out which direction led to solid ground. Then his father appeared on the balcony above. He looked older than I had ever seen him. Hunched shoulders, red eyes, a man carrying the weight of two failures at the same time. Failing his company and failing his son. "Bradley," he said softly. Junior turned. "Dad, help me. They cannot do this. You cannot let them do this. I am your son." The older man descended the stairs slowly. Every step looked heavy. "I know," he said. "I know you are." He stood in front of him, face inches away. "But I cannot save you from this." Junior's mouth opened in shock. "What do you mean? You are the founder. Tell them I stay." The older man shook his head. "I no longer control this company, son. I gave that up years ago. And you have not earned the right to run it." A single tear slid down Junior's cheek. "Dad," he whispered. His father closed his eyes briefly. Then he looked at the security guards. "It is time," he said. Junior let out a strangled sound. something between a sob and a protest. The guards stepped forward gently, not forcefully, because they knew this was not an arrest or a fight. It was an ending. They guided him through the front doors. He stumbled once, but kept moving. His father watched in silence. I watched too. Everyone in the lobby did. The doors closed behind him. The room felt different after that. The tension drained. The whispers softened. People started breathing again. His father turned to me then. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" I asked. "For stopping him from destroying what we built. And for stopping me from protecting him out of habit." I nodded. "I did what had to be done." He looked down at his hands. "I failed him." "You raised him," I said. "But you cannot run a company by inheritance. You can only run one through responsibility." We stood there in silence for a moment. "He will learn from this," I said. "I hope so," the older man replied. He stepped back, nodded once, and walked toward the elevators. I looked around the lobby. Employees were watching me now, not with fear or pity, but with something else. Reassurance. Relief. Stability. They understood what had happened even if they had not seen all of it. The wrong person had been removed, and the company had been righted. I took the elevator back up to the 12th floor. When the doors opened, the hallway lights seemed brighter. The air felt easier to breathe. My office door was open. The nameplate waited. My chair was ready. I stepped inside and closed the door quietly behind me. For the first time in hours, I sat down with no tension in my muscles. My body relaxed into the familiar shape of the seat. The hum of the building filled the silence. I leaned back and exhaled slowly. This was not revenge delivered with rage. It was justice delivered through preparation. The kind of justice that takes years to build, years to secure, and mere moments to activate. The kind that reminds you of a truth most people forget. Real power is quiet. Real power is patient. Real power is earned. I opened my laptop and sent a simple email to the board. Subject: Stabilization Plan. Message: I will handle the transition. And I did. In the weeks that followed, the company regained its footing. Morale climbed. Clients stayed. Investors relaxed. Operations carried on. People realized that the person running the company was the one who had actually been running it all along. As for Junior, I heard through a mutual acquaintance that he was taking time to find himself on a long trip abroad. I hoped he would learn something out there. Humility, awareness, perspective. But that part was no longer my responsibility. I had done my part. I had honored the work I had built. I had defended the stability we needed. I had upheld the safeguards that everyone else forgot existed. And as I sat there in my office, watching the city lights glow across the skyline, I felt a calm settle in my chest. Not triumph, not gloating, not victory, just peace. Because the truth was simple. They tried to bury me, but they forgot I was the one who planted the foundation. And you cannot bury the person who built the ground you stand on. If you enjoyed this story and believe real justice still finds a way, hit that like button. Subscribe for more true chaos behind corporate doors. And remember, sometimes the greatest revenge is simply letting your preparation speak for itself.